everyone. Welcome to Mindful Mondays. This time each week is set aside where all of us together can renew our minds and refresh our spirit, nourish our soul through this time of the coronavirus. Today, I'm talking to two members of our team about grief and loss and really the feelings associated with all of this, the vulnerability associated with it, and how we move through that in a way that leaves us healthy and whole. So thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy today's show. Hi, welcome to Mountain View Church and a program that we've put together for really just this time of national crisis that we're all in together. And what we've done is assembled just this amazing, caring team of people. We have mental health professionals, spiritual directors, wellness coaches, Christian coaches, just a team of people who actually came to me and said, we want to help. How can we help during this time? And so we are grateful that we have this team of professionals who want to support you, who want to inform you, who want to share their heart, their expertise with you, just to kind of have us all be in this together and to carry us through this time. You know, it's interesting. I was just thinking about this project and all of the different ideas that were coming into me in terms of maybe we can help people with anxiety, and maybe we can help people with depression, and maybe we can, you know, just all of the different ideas that were flooding in. And I happened to be watching that day a sound bite from the task force, the national task force that speaks every day. And Dr. Burks, who I just have respect and admiration for, she made a comment that just really stuck with me. She said, you know, there's no magic bullet for working through this. There's not one thing that we know, but here is the one thing that we know, that it's up to each person and their behavior that's going to change and influence the outcome of this pandemic. And that really stuck with me because as a mental health professional, I know how important it is to be mindful of our own behavior, and how when we become mindful of our own behavior and we start to shape and change those behaviors and we learn about things, that we can shape outcomes and we can shape our own behavior and learn and grow through whatever experience we're going through. So I'm really excited to just invite into this space with me a group of just caring hearts that want to help all of us through this. And so let me just introduce today who I have with me. I actually have two of my favorite people with me. And let me introduce first Julie Martin. And Julie Martin is a licensed marriage and family therapist. To those of you that don't know me, I'm on the executive staff at Mountain View Church. Just absolutely honored to be a part of that team. My name is Cheryl Clem. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I have with me also today Patty Geyer. Patty is a good friend of mine. She is the principal of Victory Coaching, and she is a certified licensed leadership coach through Blackaby Ministries. And so I just have respect for both of these women. And we were thinking about different topics, and you know, it was interesting to me. Again, a lot of information started coming in as this, you know, this season and this pandemic was just unwinding. And a lot of what I was hearing, and this is what I want to talk to Julie and Patty about as well, I just started hearing all of these stories of what people were going through, anywhere from a prayer request that would come in for someone who's anxiously awaiting a COVID test, to younger clients that I had who suddenly were faced with missing a graduation or some type of ceremony, or we had weddings at the church that were canceled and brides who were waiting for the big day and and we had to cancel those weddings, and it just, and my own emotions, there were just a lot of things that I experienced. All of a sudden I realized, I don't know when it's going to be that I can see my granddaughter again. Oh boy, don't talk about personal things. First rule of being an interviewer, don't talk about your personal things. They will trigger your own emotions. But it just came to my awareness that people were experiencing just loss and grief. And I didn't really in the beginning, because I'm a kind of take charge person and buckle down, and I just started getting my work done and started reorganizing everything and started getting all the groceries so I didn't have to go to the store. Like, I'm a doer, and so I just started doing those things. But as I started letting my own emotions sink in, and as I started talking to more and more people, I realized that what people were beginning to experience was really just classic grief and loss. And so my first question, and maybe Julie, you can share with us some of what you're seeing with your clients and people that you're hearing stories from. What are people experiencing during this time?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for inviting me to be part of this, Cheryl. It's a real honor.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah. I think, the overarching theme, I think that every single person, probably at least in the countries of the world where this is impacted, is experiencing a loss of control. The levels of loss go from small losses like not being able to go to your coffee shop or the store you want, or seeing your neighbor or your friend, or being able to buy toilet paper, all the way to death. So there's such a huge trajectory of losses and different types. But the thing that unites all the losses is it all has to do with control, that we don't get to decide these things anymore. And I think for our society, especially as Americans, we're not used to that. So it's really tapped into, I think, a sense of national and individual vulnerability that we have. And so I'm hearing there are some people that have not been greatly impacted as far as their lives. They're actually enjoying maybe not having to have as many commitments. And so they're enjoying, a little bit of that isolation. But then others, as you mentioned, we have people, they couldn't have a funeral. We have friends who they couldn't have a memorial service or a wedding, and then others are actually losing loved ones. And we're losing, on my personal note too, I'm not able to see my pregnant daughter's belly grow right now. She's expecting and not able to see those changes week to week. So I think each person, though the loss is different, it taps into that place of, we don't get to decide anymore, and we're vulnerable, and we don't know how it's going to end.
Yeah,
So
I think
that would be the common theme of whatever level the loss is. That would be, I think, the common theme that I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I love that. That word, I think, is so descriptive, just that vulnerability. And it's almost an awareness of the reality and the truth that we are vulnerable, right? Yeah. And Patty, I know you work with not only individuals, but you work with leaders and business owners and just a variety of different people. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Well, Cheryl, first of all, like Julie said, thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be here with you and Julie. I think it's almost a sense of confusion, because in talking to CEOs and people who run businesses, I've said, what's going on? How are you feeling? What's happening? And it's so overwhelming because they're trying to manage and deal with the change in the business climate. The economic business climate right now is off the charts like nothing we've ever seen. So it depends on the different types of businesses, but now all of a sudden they're having all of their employees work from home, trying to figure out how to deal with that. A lot of them did not even realize that the feelings that they were feeling have to do with loss and grief. because they're so overwhelmed. Like you said, Cheryl, a lot of them are very big doers, and they jump right into doing what needs to be done for survival. And then when they stop and take a moment in the coaching atmosphere and we talk about, there's a loss of your daily routine and how you do life. And there's actually grief associated with that. And there's stages of grief. And we started to talk about what those stages are and where they might be personally, where the business might be. So then they were able to start to get a framework of having words to wrap around their confusing feelings. And then when they can get some framework, some scaffolding, then they're able to manage it and able to explain better to the people that they're working with. I have to tell you one quick story. It's such a heartwarming story. One client always said, I'm never going to lay people off. Mm. And in this time and in this climate, sometimes they have to go back on their word. Mm. And one of the things that he did was to buy a cow. He bought a cow and had it divided up and gave it to all of the employees because it was just his one way of wanting to say, I want to take care of you. So like Julie said, vulnerability. People are doing things in a different way right now to help each other and to take care of each other and to stay connected. But first it comes with that confusion, and how do you label that confusion and how do you deal with it? And then how do you continue to stay connected?
Yeah, and I think that's a really, a good point, is that we do need to have language that helps describe, and many people are familiar with the stages of grief. And so maybe we can talk about that a little bit. And not that, I think one of the most important things to realize is those stages are really what they describe is that grief is a process. It's not an event and it's not a moment in time, but it is this process, and it's not necessarily a linear process, but it very much is a process. So what are some of those, and maybe Julie, just throwing this back to you a little bit, what are some of those stages of grief that you are working with clients on?
Yeah, there's several different models, of the different process. I think there's that Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages of grief, and one would be denial, and then anger, and bargaining, and depression, and acceptance. I think denial, nobody's really in denial right now. I think this is one thing we can't ignore. We can't deny, it's everywhere. So I think I'm seeing anger. I'm seeing bargaining. If I socially distance, if I wear that mask, if I stay away from my family, maybe this will be over. Maybe we can get back to work by May 1st, and I'll do my very best. And then maybe we can do that. Definitely some depression. But I'm also seeing, this has been very, very encouraging. I'm seeing people really leaning in and accepting it, really leaning in and kind of acknowledging that it is out of our control. And actually we're never in control. It actually is just revealed what's always true. And that is this virus could have happened at any point. And so we're just very exposed. Some of my clients are talking a lot about that, and that it's allowing them to really look at their lives and to reorder their lives. Mm-hmm. And it's allowing them to look at their attachments, because a lot of people's doing is in some sense an addiction and an attachment and an escape from feeling. And so we don't have that ability right now. And so we're kind of stuck with ourselves a lot more. We're stuck with who we are. We're stuck with our fear. We're stuck with our anxiety. We're stuck with our loss. And there's a real goodness to that. Mm. So some of my clients are really leaning hard into that and working hard at not trying to wiggle out of it, but kind of sitting in it, leaning into it, and just holding space there, because, it depends on, I guess, your view of God too. I don't know whether he sent the virus but he certainly allowed it. We know that. And so there's got to be some good here for us. And so So while there is grief and loss, and we all have to wrestle with that, it is an opportunity also to be changed, to be transformed in that process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is to lean into it. I love that term that you use, that people are leaning into it. And so, Patty, you talked about some of these steps, and what are you hearing, seeing in terms of the process itself of
Um, so much, Cheryl, so much. There's with the stages, just like what Julie was talking about, there's those 5 stages. And then I think it was David Kessler also, he worked with Kubler-Ross, and he added a 6th stage, which is meaning. Yes. And that is after we get through all of these stages and we've been through the denial and the anger and the bargaining and the sadness and the acceptance, then we have meaning. And that's one thing that in working with some of the pastors and the ministry leaders is they're really looking at not wanting to miss this opportunity. Is we are in an area of character development. God works within our heart and our soul all of the time on character development. And this is a great time for us as Christians, is to lean into each other and to care for each other. I mean, in the history of the Bible, it's always the Christians that are going in to help when there is a time of crisis, and the pagan gods are leaving and running away. So it's always us Christians that are leaning into it. So when we lean into this together, let's look at what does this have to do with our relationship with Christ and our relationship with others. So if we can find the meaning and how we have dealt with this also throughout all of these stages, it's really important to look at that. One of the crazy sayings I always have is emotion is like the ocean. You have to let it move through you, because the waves, when they come into the sand, they gently come up and then they go out. But if you keep it in, the waves will crash upon you like a rock, and they smash against the rock. So when we have emotions wrapped up in this, it's most important to move through it. We can't just stuff it. And that's one of the things I've seen with business owners and leaders, is they want to stuff it and just keep moving through. Like, we can do this, we can do this. And they don't want to allow that grief. They're afraid it will take them over. And truly, if they experience the grief that they're feeling and let it move through them, just like the ocean needs motion, they'll move through it much faster.
Yeah, I think that is, in my mind, one of the most important things, is that to realize that there really is no stuffing this, right? Like, it goes somewhere. I always say it shows, yeah, it shows up somewhere. It shows up as a tension in our shoulders, or a headache, or a stomach ache. Like, the body keeps the score, right? And so we can think that we're stuffing it, and maybe that's our MO, or how we're used to operating, or what we think we're doing. But that recognition, that, and I love that visual of moving through, like things moving through, because this is a process. Again, it's not an event, and it's alive, and it's in us, and it's in all of us. It's part of humanity, right? It's how God made us. Right. He didn't make us. We're not robots that can just put things aside and walk through life. We are emotional, spiritual, physical human beings. We are whole people that have body, mind, and spirit. And we need to, which is one of the reasons that when all of this, even just this idea about Mindful Mondays came together, and we named it that because we want to do it every Monday and just have it be like a reset for people, where they are mindful of what's going on, and that they engage in the process of what's going on. And we bring what we think we've stuffed to the forefront of our mind, and we let it move through us. And this idea of grief is just one of those processes. So each week we'll talk about different things, but I love to think about this idea of just these stages of grief, like Julie said, there's really not a lot of denial. It's kind of just, it's in our face, it's here every day. And so, but then there's these other aspects of people feeling down and depressed, or the anger that, the frustration that we're feeling, and something maybe comes out sideways. It's something totally different, or totally, would be small in any other time, but we're feeling that squeeze and that frustration. Or maybe we're feeling sadness. And so what are some of just the different what are just some different thoughts and ideas you have about the actual stages? Patty, you look like you had something.
Well, you know what? I just thought of this other one.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is when we are thinking about something in the future, our body is experiencing it as if it was really happening, and it's not. And that's one thing that can very easily happen in this unprecedented times that we're living in, because none of us know when this is over. So when we start to think about what's happening with our future, that creates anticipatory grief. So one of the things to do that creates anxiety. So if we find ourselves in an anxious state, and that's anticipatory grief, one of the things we can do is to get very present. And you can get very present with your senses. If you're sitting at a desk, touch the wood on the desk. If you have a cup of coffee, smell the coffee that's right there. And then in our minds is to change and have an attitude of gratitude. And if you can have an attitude of gratitude and stop and think about what you're grateful for right today, we still have food, we still have a house, we still have 2 legs that we're walking on. And then you turn that into worship and worshiping God through what is already presently happening for you. That's good. You can turn your worry into worship. So I just wanted to talk about anticipatory grief for a moment, because it's very real. And our body reacts as whatever it is you're thinking about, your body is stressing out.
That's right. Yeah, and I love those practical tools. That's one of the things that we want to bring to everybody each week too, is practical tools. Like, we're talking about these subjects, and it's like, okay, so what do I do about that? And so one of the things that you bring up is just this idea of grounding. Like, that is a tool that you can research and learn, and it's something you can practice. Again, there's no, going back to that quote, there's no magic bullet. It's each person and their behavior and what they learn and how they process this and go through this. And so I love that example. Julie, if you had to think of maybe, or share one idea about grief and loss that you think we can leave people here. I just want to kind of wrap up this time of talking about grief is real. We're all experiencing it. What tangibly can we leave with people to do, to try, that would encourage them, bring them hope to get through this?
Yes, I think my last words would just be, whatever stage you're in, feel it. Just feel it. If you're angry, feel it. If you're depressed, feel it. If you're moving into acceptance, feel it. And I think I look at Jesus, the story of him raising Lazarus, or Lazarus's death, and when he raises Lazarus from the dead, blows my mind, because here he was, knowing that he would raise Lazarus from the dead, and yet he fully entered into the grief and the sadness and the loss of his friend, even though he knew moments later. And so what a great example for us, that if we're feeling sad, feel it. Enter into that humanity, because it's not going to go away. We can't, it's going to come out, it's going to leak out somewhere. So I would say to feel it and to invite God into that place, to share whatever it is, wherever you are in that process, to invite him in, and because he wants to know where you are. He wants to be in it with you. And that's really what he's promised.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's so interesting. I've talked to a few different people who've told me, like, they've said, I'm not a crier. And yet I've had moments where I cry. Or people who are frustrated, and normally they have pretty good control over their anger, but stuff is, like I said, coming out sideways in strange ways that they're experiencing that frustration and that anger. And so the feeling it and being, again, mindful of it, aware of it, and entering into it with God and with other people.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Patty, any remaining thoughts that you have? Any other practical ideas, tools, if you had to kind of narrow it down to, okay, here's how we get through, here's how you process through the grief. What would that be? One or two things?
Yes, I think what I would say is two things. One is for yourself and one is how you treat others. So for yourself is to find a grounding verse. Find a verse in the Bible that is for this time that grounds you. Isaiah 43:2. That could be one. That one is just so, I think it's so important because you're never alone. You are never alone, and no matter what deep water you're in, you will be okay. And we are in deep water right now. So a verse like that, something like that, that hits home to your heart, that grounds you in God's love, that's a good one. And then for how we treat others, I think it's really important to treat others with stock up on compassion. If you can stock yourself up with compassion and patience, that equals grace and forgiveness.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love that. It was actually something that was on my mind too as I was thinking about this idea and just the knowledge again of the different models of how people process grief, and really understanding that it's different and unique for each person.
Yes.
And you may be experiencing it differently than other loved ones. You may be sad, they may be angry, they may be accepting, you may be all of a sudden back in denial and you're stuffing it. I mean, people go through or we're bargaining, right? Well, if this, and if I, like Julie said, if I wear my mask and if I do this, maybe these bad things won't come to me. But at the end of the day, I think you nailed it, Patty, with we have to let people experience what they're experiencing the way that they are. Grief is a very personal thing. This process is very personal to each person. And so just bring that comfort to someone, bring that grace to someone. If someone is edgy, don't bite back. If someone is crying, sit with them and don't even try to convince them that it's going to be okay. Just sit with them in it and let them be and process. Let these things, I love that. Let these things move through us because we're going to get through this together and we're going to let these things go through us. And the reminder that we're not in it alone. We're in it with each other. We're in it with a loving God who came, who gave his life for us, who knows us. And even the people that are going through, I think my heart always breaks for people who, when you talk about grief, maybe are experiencing, like Julie, what you talked about in the very beginning. Maybe for some of us, it's we can't have our favorite coffee shop. For some of us, there are some people who've lost a loved one or lost their company or lost their job or their life's work. Like there are people grieving at all different levels, and I just have compassion not to make light of this process and what stage that people are at. So be with people. I love I was rereading some scriptures this morning just on grief, and the one that stood out to me is where Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who grieve, because they will be comforted." Like, let yourself be comforted and let the people around you who are in your family, who are at your church, who are your neighbors. I would just encourage each person to, if you feel yourself stuck, and I think that's the tip, is if I look at these stages of grief, and if I'm too long in denial, if I'm too long in a stage where I'm crying all the time, if I'm too long where I'm angry or edgy, like I'm stuck. And the way to get unstuck is to connect with others and to connect with God. It's the way we're made. And so replay this tape, connect with us, call us. There's resources on the Mountain View Church website. You can go to mvc.life. And on the coronavirus page, there is a list of mental health connections. There's a list of spiritual health connections, all different other resources. Just know that you're not in this alone. There's a blog that'll come out with this topic on grief where you can learn more, where you can get more practical information and tools. You can use this information and just really let the words of we're all in this together. There's no magic bullet. It comes down to us, and us as an individual and us as a collective us. And so let this be a time where we do this together. And Patty and Julie, I am so thankful for you guys having a heart to share what God's gifted you with to be able to help others during this time. So we'll see the rest of you next Monday, and Julie and Patty may be up back with us in the future, and just so grateful for you. Thank you.